The first sighting I ever had of Risa Tessler took place in 1966. I was in 12th grade, she was in 10th grade. I just done my spring exams and I was going to go to celebrate by shooting a few baskets with my friends, including my best friend Bobby Shipper. And we went up to the North Y, YMHA, which was then far north Toronto, which is not so far north anymore because the city has grown so far beyond it. In fact, that building, which was new, has been torn down and rebuilt. Anyways, I made a mistake. I didn't bring my running shoes with me. And the attendant on the gym floor, who was obviously a former member of the Gestapo, would not let me on the basketball court. So I had to sit on the bleachers while my friends played basketball. On the court, the adjoining court, was a gaggle of girls who were playing a game that resembled in some way volleyball. And somehow the basketball, I have no idea how, rolled from the basketball side to the volleyball side, and my friends went over there to fetch the ball. And before I knew it, Bobby is speaking with this very attractive blonde girl, and I decided I'm going to go over there and meet these girls. And the attendant saw me on the floor, and she immediately shooed me off, pun intended. And that was it. I didn't really get to see Arisa. I saw her; she didn't see me. And that our actual meeting would have to wait for a couple of months till we were on a different gym floor, and that gym floor was that of William Lyon Mackenzie High School. That school was having a dance, and in those days you were not allowed to go to other high school dances. But I was social committee chairman at my high school and was doing a good job, and I had this sort of power exchange set up, and I was invited to go to the Mackenzie dance. And so I invited Bobby to go with me, Bobby Shipper, and we went into the gym, and there was a lot of unfamiliar faces there. And before I turned around, Bobby had taken off, and he went and invited that girl that he had met at the Y a couple months earlier to dance. And I watched, sat on the bleachers, and after about 2 dances, I said, well, enough is enough. I'm going to take some action here. So I got onto the gym floor, and I couldn't be stopped because I was wearing running shoes. And I cut in on Bobby, and I started dancing with Risa. And of course, I made it quite clear that I was a VIP there, and Bobby was just my wingman. And I didn't let go of Risa that whole night. And when the dance ended, I invited Risa out to get something to eat. And Bobby and I and Risa and one of Risa's friends, Sharon Silverman, left together, and we went to the Nushery in Yorkdale Mall, and we had something to eat. And that began our relationship. Risa and I's relationship went on for 3 months, but for unexplained reasons, we broke up. And then about 1.5 years later, I'm traveling north on Bathurst Street with a friend of mine, Carrie Collis. We're getting close to Shepherd. And Carrie says to me, David, didn't you go out with a girl who used to live in the manor, Bathurst Manor? And I said, yeah, I did. And he said, let's go and drop in on her. I probably wouldn't have done that on my own. And so we got over to Risa's house, and she opened the door, and she's wearing a house coat. And she said she had just gotten back from Europe and Israel, and she was sounding very worldly, and she looked magnificent. And Risa and I then started going out, and we went out for the next 1.5 years. Not exclusively, at least one of us wasn't completely exclusive. And now time passes, and now I find myself in first year medical school. Risa's in first year at York University, studying honors English. And I got, it was the spring of 1970, and I got a phone call on a Sunday from Manly. I was studying microbiology, and he said, David, we need you. Can you come over right away? We've got an unusual situation here. So I zoomed right over in the old sense of the word zoom. And I went to 56 Blue Forest, where Risa lived, and I stressed the word blue. And when I got to the front door, it was slightly ajar, so I went in and walked by Manly's, my father-in-law's fountain, which didn't have the psychedelic lights on. And as I just turned the corner, I could see Sonia, Risa's mother, in this half faint, lying on the white sofa. And she had a washcloth on her forehead. Her left hand was lying limp to the side. And I knew things were serious. It was serious because I knew that that white sofa was only for guests. And to take it even to a new level is that sofa normally had a clear plastic made-to-measure covering over it, and that had been removed. Arisa was slumped over in a chair, and she lifted her eyebrows slightly when I walked in. And looking at the situation, I judged that their dog, Mimi, must have just passed away. But Manley said no, the dog was fine. And he then explained that Risa had met some friends who had a car, and that she announced that she was dropping out of school and she was going to go with them to Los Angeles. And Sonia turned to the left and said, David, what do you think? So I paused, and I then made my move. Effectively, I exchanged my white wing pawn for the center black pawn, which allowed my white pawn to dominate the center. In other words, I played the queen's gambit, and then and there I announced that I was going for the queen and offered an alternative plan. I suggested that if Risa did not drop out of school, she finished her semester. When I finished my semester in May, that I would be more than willing to escort her to Los Angeles. Sonia then rose like a phoenix, and she said, sounds like a good idea, but what does Risa think? And Risa said, well, okay. Now at that time, I really did not have any clue on how I was going to do this. I did have a car. It was an Austin 1100, which I had bought from my brother-in-law Dennis's friend Howie Stolberg for $750, and it was worth every cent of it. And it was fine for driving around Toronto, but I had no idea whether it could get out beyond the suburbs. I figured worst comes to worst, we could always hitchhike. Now that sounds a little far-fetched, but in fact the following year, after we were married, we did go to Europe, and we hitchhiked all over Europe. A little before we were going to go away, Manley said he didn't like the idea of going in my car or hitchhiking, and he had another idea. The other idea was that we should take Sonia's car. Now, Sonia had a Cutlass Supreme with a 8-track tape deck, and he said, well, she probably doesn't need it much this summer, and that we could have the car. But then he also gave us something else. And that was, he presented me a Shell credit card. Now, up until this time, I had actually never even touched a credit card, but rumor had it that with this credit card, you could purchase gas anywhere in North America. So suddenly, I had the car, the girl, the credit card, 3 months holiday, enough time to wear that card out. So with our tent, which we bought at Canadian Tire, and our Coleman stove, we headed out on a trip that would ultimately take us 17,000 miles. We did, in fact, get to Los Angeles briefly. And when we returned 3 months later, there was no tread on our tires, and we returned to our homes, Risa to 56 Blue Forest, I to St. Clements. And then getting into bed the first night, I realized something was missing. Something fundamental was missing. But school was starting. I was starting my second year. Risa was starting her second year at York. And life went on. About 2 months later, I found myself at Manley and Sonia's house. And Sonia pulls me aside and said, let's go for a walk, David. And actually, she called me Davidl. And I said, sure. And I knew it was going to be serious because we didn't take along Mimi the dog. And about a block away from the house, Sonia said to me, David, what are your intentions with my daughter? So I could feel the heat, and I said to her, well, I am probably going to marry her one day. And Sonia said to me, well, when will that day be? And I said, well, let me think about this here. I have 3 more years of medical school, then there's internship, 3 years of residency, a couple of years of fellowship. I said, probably I'll be able to afford to get married in about, let's say, 9 years. And then Sonia said, if I were you, I wouldn't worry about that kind of thing, affording things. And I said, I shouldn't worry about that. She said, no, not at all. I said, well, then I guess I'm ready to be engaged if Risa will have me. And 2 months later, Risa and I found herself standing in front of Rabbi Kelman and Cantor Danto at the Beth Emma Synagogue in Toronto. Risa's dressed in white, I'm in black, and there you have it, checkmate. Now 50 years have now come and gone, and everything has changed, and yet some things have not changed. Our journey has taken us from apartments on Vesta Drive and Fraserwood, a home on Berrydale Crescent in Toronto, to homes on Kessler Parkway in Dallas, and our present home on Hughes Lane, where we've been for 36 years. We have traveled to all 50 states in these years, although I'm not absolutely quite sure about Iowa. We've traveled from Paris, Texas to Paris, France, from the Near East to the Far East. We've been to the southern tips of South America, Africa, India, to the northernmost tip of Norway. We have traveled the 7 seas, although I'm not quite sure there are 7 seas. We have traveled to all 7 continents. Actually, we haven't been to Antarctica, but we don't intend on going, so it shouldn't count. We have been on quite a few missions to Israel with Federation, AIPAC, JNF, and Bonds. We've been to Israel spa hopping with our friends, the Levines. And we've been to Israel with our entire family and various combinations of the family. And we look forward to going back to Israel as soon as it's possible. We have gone from a couple with no children to having 5 children. We now have 10 married children with 15 grandchildren. Along the way, we had to say goodbye to all of my grandparents and all of our parents, who we think of often and continue to feel their presence. We have merged with 5 other families: the Morris, Seitlin, Sacker, Bates, Cornvase families. We are now a super family. Reese and I have camped in a construction site in downtown Los Angeles, along the road just beyond the lights of Las Vegas, on the beach in Corpus Christi. We have been awakened by police at 3 a.m. and asked to take down our tent and leave a city park in the King of Prussia, Pennsylvania. The police seemed not to believe me when I told them Reese was actually the Queen of Prussia. On the other hand, we have lived or stayed in palatial hotels all over the world. I am aware that Sonia played an active role in our marriage. Perhaps she, like our matriarchs, was a prophet who knew how things were supposed to turn out. If things were not going the way they should, she was prepared to intervene. She could also act as a catalyst to make sure that things happened a lot faster than they might if they were left to their own accord. For my part, all I had to do was to be at the right place at the right time, wear running shoes, and wait patiently for the right opportunity, and then make my move and go for the queen. I have not had many goals in my life. I wanted to use my talents with which I was blessed to help as many people as possible, and I wanted to go to bed each night, wherever that bed happened to be, with my wife, Risa. I have now done that 18,250 nights, and that is not enough. Risa, our lives over the past 50 years have been productive and reproductive. If given a chance, I wouldn't change much. Perhaps I would not have ordered those made-to-measure shoes, but other than that, not much else. Some of you older people will remember the iconic comedian Bob Hope, who used to have an annual Christmas event about this time of the year at military stations or on the deck of a military ship to entertain the troops. And during the show, at some point, he would invite out some gorgeous star, such as Brooke Shields. And then the camera would show the faces of 3,000 soldiers, and you could see them simultaneously all falling in love. It was incredible. It is, in fact, easy to fall in love. What's much harder is to stay in love. To stay in love, you have to feel grateful to God who helped set you up in the first place and who has accompanied you along your journey. You have to at times be at least partially deaf to one another's complaints. You need to be consistent in deed and in word. You need to learn how to trust one another like two trapeze artists who catch each other while flying through the air. You need to share the same vision, not just the same television. You need to be able to feel one another's pain and wish you could take it on yourself. You need to be humble enough to know that 1 and 1 adds up to far more than 2. You need the strength, endurance, and wisdom to raise a family and behave like they are a family, and you need to be partners in every way possible. I believe, Risa, that we have done all of that. We have been successful not because we were so good, so wise, so extraordinary, but because we were committed ourselves to be the guardian of each other's happiness. And this has stoked the fires of our love. My Risa, my Rebecca, 50 years ago, I was able to lift you out of your blue forest blues. And together we discovered not only America, but also ourselves. We learned that we could not live apart. Over the past 50 years, we have created lives and we have saved lives. We have experienced most of the highs and not too many of the lows that life had in store for us. We have honored our parents, and we have been honored by our children and our grandchildren, and we are still very much in love. We now move into the next half century of our lives together. I hope that our children will do what our parents did and what we have now done, and that is reach one of life's greatest milestones, the 50th wedding anniversary. The future, as always, is uncertain, but as long as we're together, we will always make the best of whatever life has in store for us, and we look forward to continue to harvest all that we have sown. So I now return to what Risa wrote 50 years ago tonight. Wondrously we whirl in the formless form of us, not you or I, but you and I, and far, far more. Risa, my love, happy golden 50th anniversary.